right, here we are, The Real Dirt with Chip Baker. On today's Dirt, I have Christian Sederberg, one of the architects of legal cannabis in Colorado. Longtime friend, great advisor to me and other people here in the cannabis industry. Say hello, Christian.
Oh, thank you very much, and real pleasure to be here, and excited for this. I'm really excited for getting the word out, and it sounds like you've got a good plan here, so happy to be a part of it.
Yeah, you know, there's so much information that's new and interesting to people on the subject of cannabis, regardless of if it's business, technology, politics, growing. You know, I've said it before, but almost everyone who's ever smoked a joint has had this like aha moment of, I can grow $1 million. I can make $1 million. And I know both of us has actually seen people accomplish this over time. Let's start off with the who, what, and when. Tell me about yourself, Christian.
Sure. So, I'm actually from Denver, grew up in Denver, lived here my entire life with the exception of a short stint in Southern California, San Diego, where I went to college. I lived in Boulder for 3.5 years, but I consider that pretty much living in Denver, although as many you and
Locals
many others
don't consider that. Right?
Yeah, I was going to say it's another world up there, and certainly a bubble that I lived in for a little while. But yeah, I've been a lawyer since 2005. Worked in private equity, real estate, a bunch of interesting development projects, golf courses. We built a golf course, which I think is, Jack Nicklaus. It was a Jack Nicklaus designed course down in Trinidad, Colorado, that now doesn't exist or it's overgrown, but it's, it was one of the big projects I was working on. Yeah. In 2008, 2007, 8, 9 hit the massive, obviously the huge financial crisis. Real estate was hit really hard, but I was still, at my old job. I'd been friends actually with some of the, I call them hippie lawyers, but I don't, my friends that worked for the ACLU or that did,
politically
activism.
active. Yeah.
Politically active people, immigration attorneys. And I met a guy, Brian Vicente, who spent quite a bit of time with him skiing and other things just through this network. We ended up renting houses together up in the mountains for the wintertime and
networking.
Yeah, exactly. Networking. And I was always like, man, how do you have this as a job, working on medical marijuana? He's running Sensible Colorado alongside Mason DeVert, who's running Safer, sort of like coordinating. Mason and Steve Fox were kind of doing the marijuana safer than alcohol. Brian was really fighting on the medical marijuana front with, Sean McAllister and Rob Corey and some of those interesting characters and, friends from around Colorado. And it was 2009, late 2009, Brian said, hey, can I buy you a burrito at Chipotle? There's some interesting things happening that you might be interested in. And
so many good deals start on a burrito.
Yeah, man. Well, I said, I'll buy you a burrito because he's working for a nonprofit making probably he was making next to nothing. It was just something he was very passionate about. So,
heartfelt work.
He said, I was the cool corporate lawyer. Josh Capel, our now business partner, then law student, had mentioned to Brian, we need sort of a corporate person who can do, corporate work, forming companies, contracts, those types of things. And I was sort of the cool corporate attorney they knew because of my hippie lawyer friends. I'd help them when they had something come up or if they wanted to start
See, knowing you now, I don't see you as the corporate attorney.
I don't think I ever was actually. That's why I was like the cool corporate lawyer.
You just worked in the space. Right.
Yeah, and I liked it. I mean, that was certainly, I came out of law school and I didn't want to go to court. I wanted to do deals and.
Served you well.
Yeah. Well, thanks, man. And, so that was 2009, late 2009. And then House Bill 1284, which was the, medical marijuana law that passed in Colorado through the legislature in 2010. So about a month before it passed or a couple of weeks before it passed, I'd been planning and we'd been working with Brian and some other folks that were lobbying at the Capitol. And, it kind of came to me as I was looking around and I loved the partners that I worked with and everything, but they, with the exception of one guy.
They weren't as cool as we.
Yeah.
They weren't as cool as cannabis.
Exception of one guy when he's like, oh yeah, man, I've, come to my ski condo and like, I've got a 2-foot bong from college and, it's this funny older guy, but like everyone else was like, not marijuana consumers or that marijuana interested, but they were totally cool with it. But kind of figured
people are.
Yeah, I figured it'd be a better opportunity to kind of go off on my own and do it as opposed to doing it with the firm.
You guys were one of the only people doing it at that time. Really.
Yeah, you had Warren Edson and Rob Corey and Sean McAllister and Bob Hoban. A handful of folks were kind of
pioneers.
Yeah, exactly. Looking in the space. I definitely came in at a time when it was starting to become more, it was, transitioning into sort of a regulated market. So, it's really interesting. We founded the firm May 24th, 2010. I believe it was at a little bar called City O City down in Capitol Hill. And,
oh yeah. One of my favorite place, City O City plug right here.
Yeah, there you go. And
liquor and vegan food.
Exactly. And I told Brian, he's like, "Can Christian's firm's going to help us do some stuff?" And I said, "Why don't we just start a new firm and we can work together? It seems like it'll make a lot more sense being close, integrated." My old boss, when I told him, was like, "I'm glad you figured it out. I was worried I was going to have to push you out the door, because it seems like a great opportunity for you to kind of go off, and we'll be here to support you, but we're more of a white shoe. Some of our existing clients probably wouldn't appreciate it." So talked to my mom, borrowed a couple $1,000 for a couple months rent. And, she the first thing she said was, "Well, it's medical marijuana, so it's not like you're legalizing marijuana." I said, "Well, the plan," and that was Prop 19 days, if you remember. So that was like Prop 19 was up and running.
So you guys were self-funded. You only started on a few $1,000.
Yeah. And that was, the first day we had just a line of clients out the door, and, they were coming in because the bill basically gave them till June 30th to vertically integrate if they weren't already. And then there was going to be another month, the month of July. They had to file all of their state licenses per the law on August 1st.
Yeah, everyone needed help doing
it was crazy. And so, we just kind of approached it as a...
Well, that's your corporate background came in immediately.
Yeah, it did. But it was funny. Right. It was like it came in and I realized very quickly that what I'd been used to doing, which were mid-market deals, 5 to however tens of millions of dollars, these transactions, that was not going to work. Because I'd be like, okay, we'll do a term sheet, or we'll do, letter of intent, or, what's the next steps? And, the next day someone else walked into somebody with a bag of money, and had already bought the place, or they'd already found a new partner. But it was crazy because people were walking around like just strong vendee relationships, people that own stores that were buying from backpacks. They were trying to go to their best people and say, "All right, let's start a grow." But, so in 30 days, like just hundreds, hundreds of partnerships, many of which do not exist anymore.
It was so rapid. It was burning like wildfire in 2010.
Oh, it was insane. And it was, I always talk about those days because there'll never be anything like it.
When was that date again? May
24th, I think, 2010. That's at least when I think we filed our paperwork officially too.
In May of that month, I had one hydroponic store, right? And in that month, I did more business in 1 month than I'd done in the previous 2 years.
Oh man.
Right. Because just like you said, it was vertical integration was it just happening. And,
totally.
At the time, there's only 13 stores in the industry here.
Yep.
But now there's 180. So
yeah, it was wild. And it was
thinking about opening up a hydro store here. I don't think it's a good idea.
Those are crazy times. And one of the crazy things that happened was right in the middle of it. So June of 2010. So I just met Josh, who just graduated law school, and Brian, who's, but Josh knew everything about the law because Josh was his intern in law school. And this is what Josh is brilliant, and
yeah, he was passionate about it. He still is.
Yeah, absolutely. And Brian's dad actually was very sick and went in for surgery in early June. So a week or so after we started the firm, and the surgery did not go well. And basically Brian said, "Guys, I'm checking out. My father is probably not going to be with us very long." And, this was June, first couple of weeks of June. And it was basically like, wow, we just started this firm and Brian was going to be gone. I mean, he was still checking in with us occasionally, but basically Josh and I spent 20 to 22 hours together every day for 37 straight days, just trying to make sure everything really went as smoothly as it could possibly go. Looking back, it was total insanity, but, pretty smooth, I would say. I took 2 days off after the June 30th deadline and then back to it for the state applications, which was another totally insane process. With people, it's 5-10 pages now with some supplemental stuff. That was every bank record you have for the last 5 years. It was like bank records, credit card records, your wife, your kids. How many cars do you have? What are their VIN numbers? Every single piece of financial information to your name. I mean, just stacks 10 feet high in some cases. And they all had to be done, after all these partnerships were jammed together. Then that was the next 30 days, putting that into a state application, which was, down at the dog track. Some people may remember it. It's now been knocked down, but there was people gambling on off-track betting that was the same location where you go turn your applications in. It was totally, totally insane. But it was
well, interesting.
Yeah,
I wonder
fun.
if that gambling influence had anything to do with how they've structured the applications.
Oh yeah, it's totally gaming. I mean, if you look at a lot of people don't remember this, but their plan was that they were going to have cameras in every grow, and those cameras would be plugged into the Marijuana Enforcement Division's office.
Right.
And then they'd be sort of watching plants grow. Well, that room where they did that, all those computers are gone. There used to be like 40 computers like in a long, skinny line. Those computers are gone, and now it's sort of flex space or something, and all the infrastructure they brought in, just in terms of bandwidth and other things to do all this, totally has been rethought. So they've now gone to more of a hybrid liquor gaming world, but it's a lot of those guys come from gaming. So I think a lot of our stuff is approached like gaming. So when you talk about ownership, what is ownership and
background?
Yeah. All that stuff. They're used to, a lot of the background people, a lot of them came out of gaming and still do. Like Will Lucella, who's number 2 over there, came in, head of licensing. Came from gaming, and Lewis came from gaming, Lewis Koski.
All the other states have chosen to go with a liquor or agricultural model. I shouldn't say all of them, but many of them have. It's unique that Colorado chose this method.
Yeah. Right. And in some of the other states, even though they're doing it under the ag or whatever, they still kind of went with this. So we went with like a gaming model with no real restrictions on total numbers of licenses, whereas most states will have, in some states you got like 10, there'll be like 10 gaming licenses that were issued, usually a governor or someone went to jail for the corruption involved in that process, wherever it was for the gaming model, But when you talk about regulating it, I think having a Department of Revenue regulate it, the reason why it's done here in the Department of Revenue is because they also regulate alcohol, tobacco, gaming, but it's interesting if you put it in ag or in health departments. I think that's where we've seen a lot of challenges. Massachusetts, it's in their health department, and all of a sudden you got like a sort of a revenue enforcement function that you really sort of, you do need really cops or whatever you want to call them. They're enforcement, police officers in Colorado. They're peace officers, so they carry guns and stuff. But that approach, as opposed to a health department, they're not used to awarding licenses or monitoring things that closely.
Right,
so
of it.
I think it's a good setup here, and it's obviously evolved into the most, really the most robust and mature regulatory environment. But a lot of that's just been trial and error,
The interaction between the police, the Marijuana Enforcement Division, it's an interesting interaction with the customer or with the grower or the dispensary owner, because previously that was the last thing that a grower or a cannabis dealer ever wanted to see or talk to.
Oh yeah, it's wild, right? Because everything was all secretive. It was about not creating all these records and other things, because those were always used against you. And now it's like you're compelled to do so, and you're working with law enforcement officers. Like if you go to the Med, they used to have the big seal ups at Criminal Enforcement Division, and all of them have guns on. And in fact, it's pretty funny. You have to test, you have to shoot every so often to recertify on your ability to hit a target. We joke about hit the broadside of a barn, and there's some funny stories that were told where guys that they really need to bring in because of their expertise but they were like training them because they were terrible shots, and they were compelled to carry a gun, so it's a really, they've, for what they've done, I think that the challenge for them is it's, a lot of people don't think about it this way, but it's the flip of what happened to growers and retailers and other people that weren't used to the cops. The cops weren't used to, having the people that they're serving and protecting being the people that they used to go after. And in fact, they got a lot of crap from, some of the other law enforcement officers that they'd previously interacted with. There were certainly times where I heard stories from these guys that were off the record, so I won't name names, but they said, look, my former colleagues won't talk to me. I'm not welcome at happy hours, or if I am, all I do is take shit the whole time, and it's just not, it's not the same. And
because they were being shunned by the previous.
Yeah, you're working for the drug dealers or something, and that was early on. I think a lot of people now have seen it as a really good career advancement opportunity. The career path being switch over to MED and then go find a private sector job.
Right. That's something I'm really interested in, is like at what point will people change their minds and decide to go another way? Now we're speaking right now of like time frame, 2010, May and June. And at this point, the cannabis growers and the cannabis dealers decided that, hey, I'm going the other way. I'm going to be a legal producer. Right. Did you see a flip come? Did it flip like that? Or was it a slow roll, a gradual thing?
I mean, there was a very, very quick move because if you had a local application in by June 30th, so if you had a local license, which very few places had, Denver had retail store licenses, Boulder had some retail licenses, no grow licenses in Denver, anything like that, no MIPS. But if you had an application for a local license in by June 30th, you were allowed to continue to operate until your license was ultimately acted upon by the state, meaning you were in this sort of period of time, which we thought would take a couple of months, ended up taking a year or more, sometimes 2 years for people to actually be issued their licenses because there's such a huge backlog. Right. But that was a flip. And basically everyone, I think a lot of people saw it. Most people, I think, tried to get into the regulated space. I think some people didn't find their way in, but the people that were doing well selling with backpack, going around with backpacks. And obviously the problem was if you had a felony, you were out. Right. And so that was, looking back, there was no way this would have changed, and we've tried to change it ever since, but that was a huge mistake. And I think that when you look at states and countries that are doing this, like we've always said, why would you cut the people out? Judge them on their character, not on their, just because they got busted with a joint or even busted growing at some point in their life, if it's been time or if they've, if they can show that they're of good moral character, you can't just cut them out forever because, what do you think they're going to do? They're just going to keep doing what they're doing. So you cut out a bunch of people. Reform.
I mean, that's why people go to jail. That's why we supposedly have jail is reform.
Yeah. And anyone who's really being honest about this too, so just because you didn't get caught, you were rewarded by being even better at doing this illegal activity because you never got caught. Now that's not everybody, and it's not to say people are bad for doing it, but it's just simply saying you're busting all the people out of the system that got caught, but all the people that didn't and that have done, or at least some of the people that didn't, you're keeping them in. Now, again, I'm not judging that at all. I'm just saying you should just look at it for what it is, which is if you're going to try to change to a regulated market, you should be as inclusive as possible. If you look at what, in California, this is such a huge issue. In Jamaica, pretty much everywhere we go, it's like, well, how do we not disrupt what has been a lifestyle or, generational lifestyle?
Oh, right. Sure. I've heard people speak about this in Jamaica.
Yep.
Right. That it's traditional for the Rastamans to sell cannabis openly on the street, and they want to keep that aspect of distribution.
And you got to look at these things and just no one size fits all. Every place you go, there's going to be a different.
Everybody's different. Everybody's different. So. Some states want to require organic only. Some states seed only.
Right.
Some states completely vertical integrated.
Yep.
States like California, they're really developing what appears to be a progressive marketplace, allowing for so many different entries in the marketplace.
Yeah, there's going to be a ton of opportunity in California and elsewhere. Obviously, Colorado, it's a relatively small market, and so we're at this sort of point now where it's I call it a mature market, and it's not. I mean, they're still. Compared to many other markets, it's not mature, but in terms of cannabis markets, it's mature. And I always joke about how we're really addressing first world regulated cannabis problems now. We're not, I talk about pesticides. I talk about, this organic certification thing, at the state level or, focusing on those types of things. And, as I'm complaining to my friends, they're like, well, I can still be busted with a joint, or it's still illegal here. Your guys, the issues you're going through, edibles, how do we regulate them? How do we make sure that kids don't eat them, or what do we do to minimize accidental ingestion or minimize confusion so that, and this happens. I don't know if it's like a Colorado thing, but it's kind of spreading around the country now. Like when you go to a party and there's food out, it's like, wait, medicated, not medicated, or recreated or not recreated or whatever, it's dealing with these sort of nuanced problems.
Yeah, the edible industry really has created some unforeseen issues. I mean, we've always from existence, when I've heard about ganja brownies, I heard about the problems with them. Oh, I accidentally ate a ganja brownie. We put ganja brownies out and didn't tell anybody, and somebody went to the hospital.
Oh, man, because, there's nothing worse than consuming edibly. It's like the worst experience one of the worst experiences I've ever had.
Absolutely.
Just like So it's like, and then when you bring it to a commercial level, so it goes from just like, oh yeah, I made some cookies, and everyone's going to be a little bit cautious, right? It's like, well, how much did you put in? Or, so everyone's just kind of like, there's no, you start slow, you automatically, you're like, I'm not going to eat 5 of these things. You're going to see what happens. But with the edible industry and things being so small and looking and frankly, tasting so good and other,
it's hard.
It's hard
just
not
to eat one.
Yeah, exactly. It's not like, and you're not getting them in the parking lot at Red Rocks.
Right. That's the beauty of the smaller dosing, because previously when it started out, it was just, large dosing or undetermined dosing. And
totally.
The 5 milligram dosing, those are great because you can eat a few of them. And
totally. I would say that in terms of adoption by new like consumers, it's like people in my sort of age group, like the mid to late 30s that are like, man, I have 2 drinks and I'm like hungover at work the next day, or whatever. But like the 5 to 10 milligram dose and like kind of this like makes you like loosens you up. And, some people are better at it than others, but it's not like that is you're getting one so you can go have a bordering on psychedelic experience or actual psychedelic experience in my case.
Actual psychedelic experience.
From just a little bit much, but it's, I'd say that's where I see it, when they talk about edibles or getting a bigger percent of the market share, I think that's certainly a very interesting target. The only tricky thing about it is like you have really, really awesome tasting edibles. That just makes you, people have a hard time not
just
eating more,
one,
right? And so I think it's just a very interesting thing to figure out. And so you talk to guys like Steve Fox, when, he was Mason, Steve, Brian, these guys that were sort of the visionaries in 04, 05 on these sort of long run campaign in Colorado to change hearts and minds about marijuana being less harmful than alcohol. It was really just smoking. They weren't thinking
they were just
that
puffing.
This would, right, exactly, or puffing and like
puffing weed.
So between that and sort of concentrates, dabs, concentrates, although again, I think the concentrates market, or depends on how you sub-segment the concentrates market. You look at, the OPEN or other sort of mainstream, these ones that really came out of the gate in 2010, 11. People love these. Even people that have not used marijuana.
Are vape pens with
vape pens, right?
Concentrate.
With pre-concentrate, usually pretty mild, lower concentrations.
They're perfect for traveling, for light use.
Yep, it's the Bud. I always joke about it's the Bud Lighter. If you're in Colorado, the Coors Light of weed, right?
Because it takes the edge off.
Yeah, it's just like a maintenance thing too, or if you want to puff it a little bit at a
you're at
show.
the bank, you've been there for a long time, little vape pit just makes it work.
Right, exactly, man. Right. So it's a slip it in your bag, right in your pen section, and long meeting you can sneak out for a quick private session.
It has added a whole new meaning to I forgot my pen.
I know.
Right? Do you have my pen?
I know. I think I've lost more than I've certainly, I'm a lighter thief and other things, but I've lost, I don't know how many of those pens, but, especially friends from out of town, like, where can I get these? How many? I'll go buy every single cartridge I can. It's a very, they're very popular, but they don't even know. I mean, there's so much beyond it in terms of concentrate oils and everything else that it's but this is not things they were contemplating. It was really joints, bongs, maybe.
The innovation of technology due to the legal market. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about concentrate techniques.
Yep.
The whole dab culture is really like accelerated because cannabis is legal in so many places.
Oh, it's fascinating.
With the vape pens.
It's hugely controversial. And like I always tell people when it does become controversial, I mean, we obviously just beat back this potency initiative to knock down potency on everything, edibles, concentrates, and flower to 16%, like a one-size-fits-all thing. Well, obviously that would have wrecked the concentrate market.
Absolutely.
But I told them, like, just because you see on TV, someone or, YouTube video of some kid, doing dabs and I'm like, look at Animal House, they toss Bluto, the bottle of Jack, and he chugs the whole thing. Like, I know people that use dabs that like it's their preferred method because it's like actually provides like a clear experience for them, and it's they can actually
it's a very small amount of stuff that you consume, so it's
totally
there's an argument that it's very healthy for you.
We get attacked for smoking. If you look at the harms of marijuana, like health harms, the one thing that they always point to that's hard to argue with is the smoking part.
Absolutely.
Even though there's a lot of people saying, well, yeah, there's no studies that prove it, but like barbecuing, that's not good for you. There's no question that smoke going into your lungs generally is probably not the best idea. Maybe it's, it does have some medicinal value, so the swelling and, inflammation. But at the same time, they're always complaining to us about how it's, smoking's this bad thing. It's really the only bad thing. Yet they want to bring down potency back to the Woodstock weed. This isn't your Woodstock weed. This is, this is not what your parents used to smoke. It's like, no, and you can smoke less of it. And it's
one hit,
better
2 hits. It's better for you.
Don't get me wrong. I think there's a market totally. Like I think someone should open this is your parents' Woodstock weed store.
Oh, absolutely.
It's I don't know why someone doesn't do it. Just like, this is low potency stuff. And like, have all the people with crazy expendable incomes that don't even think about, they're not very price sensitive because they haven't smoked in a long time,
Yeah, there's a huge segment of cannabis consumption that hasn't even been addressed yet. Everyone in the new legal market really focuses on indoor cannabis, the strains, but absolutely an import cannabis market, an exotic cannabis market, a low THC cannabis market. All of that really does exist. It just hasn't been developed yet.
No, I mean, everyone, 20% of people smoke 80% of the cannabis, either through concentrates or, flower. And so they're very price sensitive. It's the same thing with alcohol, but that's why we have, not to say that there isn't high quality, low cost. I don't want to put anyone down here, but with alcohol, there's the Smirnoffs up to the Grey Gooses, and there's people, if you look at wine, if you want to compare it to wine.
There's a reason
beer.
To drink Coors Light. There really is.
Absolutely.
It's a cool hot afternoon. You don't want to get wasted. You're just having social 3.2 alcohol consumption.
No, man. And so, I mean, I think that it's, there's a whole untapped market of the 80% of people that smoke 20%. And if you're those 80%, the cost is much less, much less of a concern. Yeah,
I believe currently almost half of the revenue in Colorado is associated with concentrates.
Yeah, it's wild.
Right. I don't know I believe that includes edibles as well. I'm not quite sure, but.
Yeah, and it's interesting, right? Because it's hard to really know how much, edibles or concentrates are smaller. They're easier if you are going back to another state, because you flew in here, and then you're visiting. It's just so much. Yeah, it's so much easier, and it also just doesn't look or smell as bad as the flower. So I think it's also, and also, I mean, that's not to put down. I think it is they can be very good products. Sometimes, not my product of choice all the time, unless I know who I'm with and how much I'm getting. I'm sure. Again, I had a similar experience as some that the first time I did a dab, and it was.
Heart
called
pounding.
It the thermonuclear THC delivery device is what, my buddy, this was 4 or 5 years ago. He
what did this thing look like?
It was awesome. It was like this. My buddy Todd, he like gave me this hand blown piece that he got, and he was like, check it out. This is how you do it. I'm like, what the, like the creme brulee torch from my parents' house, and this was before anyone was doing it. And even my most experienced smoker friends were like, I was like telling about it.
What is that?
Yeah. And then I just remember going up, I forget who I was seeing, My Morning Jacket at Red Rocks, I think in 2010 or 11. And I just remember my buddies that, usually loud, rambunctious, were just staring out the window while we're driving up in the van.
Absolutely.
Just not saying a word. And then finally, an hour and a half later, my buddy's like, what the hell is that?
Yeah, I've seen them stop, especially in the early days, stop more than one party.
Oh, yeah, man.
Right? And, try this.
I want Josh Capel, my business partner. I'm sure he'll hate me for telling it, but first time he ever did it. You should ask him about his first time, because he took a milky 2-foot bong. He had no idea what he was doing, and it was right. It was at a party.
Overdose was rampant early years.
This was the clinic's Christmas party with the cannabis cut winning, whatever. And I just remember seeing his eyes, he didn't go down, but he was like, I won't be talking anymore. Please point me in the direction of home. Oh, yeah, right. I remember the first time it really worked on me. I just had this mantra in my head. I'm a professional. I can handle this. Right. And I said that for about 30 minutes as people walked around me in my kitchen as at a party. Right. I'm a professional. I can handle this. He seems cool. He doesn't, He's totally together, and you're just in your mind oh boy, play it cool. Well, hey, let's have a break right there. Hey, this is The Real Dirt with Chip Baker. I'm here with my friend Christian. We're talking about cannabis. All right, and we're back. This is Chip Baker with The Real Dirt, and we're rolling it up with Christian Sederberg from Vicente Sederberg. As at the break, I was thinking about when I started working with you guys, and I think it was around 2013, maybe. Yeah, it was right at the end of 2013 or something, right before retail cannabis, 2014, when they legalized. Right before the stores actually opened. Right before the stores actually opened, when they legalized it for adult use. Yeah. Right. Those were some really exciting times right there, business-wise. I know you guys were had tons of projects going into legal cannabis. Everybody wanted to get in it, and that was their opportunity to do it. Yeah, it was. right after the law passed, obviously it took a year and a couple of months to get the stores open, but that legislative session was really an interesting time. So the existing industry, or at least the representatives at the capital of the existing industry, were really pushing hard for keeping vertical integration and putting a much longer, keeping or increasing the length of the residency requirement, things that were really not a part of Amendment 64. One of the problems with vertical integration from the medical days was, well, one, there was a lot of people that should never have been partners in the first place. Right. The people that were already vertically integrated really did push that law initially, the medical law. So
people were so against vertical integration at first, and then it just changed.
Well, it's like, it's one of those, I was joking with Charlie in my office. He was against the residency requirement until his 1 year anniversary on Tuesday.
Right.
He's like, I don't mind the 1 year requirement. I'm like, yeah, no one does when it benefits you. I mean, I very much believe in free markets, and that doesn't mean I realize totally regulated it's heavily regulated in other things, but any types of inefficiencies you put in terms of limiting stores, limiting the number of grows, requiring things that other businesses, agricultural businesses, technology businesses don't have to deal with, like what you end up doing is hurting yourself and hurting competition. One of even though first world marijuana problems, we're going through this.
And I was against it too in those early days, but it ended up being really good to some degree because it allowed this natural organic growth of the industry without all these pressures of outside money or just stupid investors.
Oh yeah.
You had to be a resident. You had to, follow some sort of decorum to get it there.
Well, and the big thing for us too was that when we were doing the task force, the governor's task force, the recommendation was 3 years more of vertical integration and, basically another increasing residency requirements. And they ended up staying the same, this 2 year Colorado residency requirement. But that sort of discussion, debate, they wanted 3 years of vertical integration. I said I'd be fine with one, meaning like really only let the people that have been in the business in Colorado that have proven themselves, that we know, that the regulators know what it takes to run these businesses. Don't just throw the doors wide open on January 1st, 2014. It made sense to transition into something. So what we ended up doing is, it was January 1st, 2014, first sales were going on. And then, January 1st, 2015 basically was when the first independent cultivators started, coming online, meaning
wholesale.
Yeah, wholesalers, which has still it's developed quickly in some cases, but it's not developed. It's a lot harder of a business. A lot of these people just thought, I'll just come in and grow.
Right. Farming's hard.
Yeah, I'll just drop the price and, I'll eliminate all that overhead.
I'll make millions.
No, exactly. Like everyone that's ever sat in our office obviously is the best grower. And, in college they did this and of course I can scale it. They don't realize it's really having the talents of a master grower. Yeah, a lot of it's HR. I'm starting to realize it too at a firm as it grows. It's, it's the ability to manage people, human resources, and it's not, you're just a really good grower. The other problem being that everyone just thinks they're a really good grower, and there's not that many. There's a ton of really good growers, but there's, it's not everybody. Let's just leave it at that. So, and then you have people who are traditional agriculture, right? Traditional ag, and I'm going to bring in some scientists, and I'm going to really bring a science approach. And again, what happens is the way you finance these things, it's difficult. The way, it's hard to keep good people. It's tough work. It's not easy. It sounds glamorous, but it's not the most glamorous job a lot of times, and particularly as it's getting more and more boring, it's less underground, Yeah,
it's farming. And, one of the things that brought people to cannabis cultivation was it could be this part-time job for them, and they can have another life or career or pursue their own dreams of travel or acting or art, photography, whatever it might be, car restoration.
Yep.
And that's honestly a different type of person than works on a farm or works in a horticultural environment on a day-to-day basis, 8 hours a day, 10 hours a day.
Yeah. And it sort of becomes like a lot of other stuff where if you want to start in one of these big regulated businesses and you start as a junior person, you got to work your way up and eventually maybe you get to be that person. It's a lot more, it's more corporate in some ways. That being said, because of the fact there's so much new business opportunities, it's very entrepreneurial, so the people that are working there, a lot of them are working there so they can figure it out and then go start their own thing. And so, that's a little bit, not every kid that graduates and goes to an accounting firm is like, I'm going to start my own accounting firm, or, you know.
Because it's not too late. You can still be involved in this industry. You can still literally invest or come to Colorado or move to one of the other states, you know, and be involved in it.
Yeah, sure. And so, you know, in Colorado in particular, we just passed a law finally sort of not completely getting rid of the 2-year residency requirement, which for, you know, until January 1st, 2017, so coming up here, until that point in time, everyone, in order to be an owner or to share in profits, even if you're a landlord and you want, you know, to charge your tenants rent, but also take 10% of gross or net, that's a huge number. But, you know, this is what shopping centers do all the time. This is how, you know, you get, yeah, exactly. And you add in a revenue sharing component. That means you had to be a resident of Colorado for 2 years, go through all this licensing stuff. If you weren't a resident or if you had a felony or any of these other things, you were out.
This was initially called the Snoop Dogg bill.
Yeah, well, there's the Snoop Dogg provision, which is the reasonable royalty. So yeah, so now you don't have to be a resident to be an owner.
You don't have to live here, or you.
Yeah, no, you don't have to live here. Now, if you want to be the person in the responsible party, and they reduce the residency requirement to a year. So without getting into too many of the gory details, you can have limited investments. Once you have an out-of-stater, it limits the total number of people you can have as your sort of investors and owners. So I think the idea is they don't want publicly traded companies, which are explicitly not allowed, nor do they want 400 people chipping in $10,000, you know, and then have to deal with that regulatory thing. So they limit it to like 15 people, but there's beyond that, again, without getting into the gory details, you can be a passive investor or even an active investor. You could live in another state and, you know, vote on what the company's going to do, what the board of directors looks like. Much more traditional, you know, from a policy standpoint. I think it actually creates the 50-state strategy for federal, you know, fundamental change to the federal law, which is when a lot of this is really going to take off. But, you know, now if we got a guy who lives in Alabama that's invested in the marijuana industry, you know, Alabama's not coming around anytime soon, particularly if that person happens to be a high net worth person, particularly if that person knows United States senators or mayors or governors or their local city council people. This is a way. Yeah, everyone. This makes it so at least so people get involved, and it's no longer, you know, just what's Colorado and Washington doing, and California might do it. You know, I mean, it's less of a
people from all over the world have come here to do this.
Oh yeah, man, and that, you know, it's amazing to me. I think we've toured I don't know how many people from around the world in terms of federally elected officials in other countries, you know, senators from multiple South American countries, from, you know, European countries, from South American countries, African countries. I mean, every single, you know, I mean, there's a few exceptions that are just so anti-cannabis, you know, that they're not coming here or even interested. But we had people that are like, oh, we're not going to change our laws anytime soon, but we just want to see what it looks like, you know. And then they come in, and we actually formed a nonprofit just to facilitate these tours. You know, we just had.
What's that called?
It's called the Council on Responsible Cannabis Regulation.
Oh,
CRCR.
Sure. I've seen that, but I didn't quite know what it was.
Yeah, we toured it. You know, it started with 50 people coming in for the Drug Policy Alliance conference in 2013. And I just I put this whole tour together. I rented buses and had my staff running it. And we just, you know, went so well that we decided we'd formalize it, but create a nonprofit just to make it easier on us to sort of direct people to that. You know, hopefully have my partners not say, how much time are you spending driving who around, you know? So we staffed it. Chloe's amazing and Steve Fox works on it. But, you know, we've had, I think it's 22 countries, something like that. And as recently as last week, we had Caribbean nations in town.
And so what goes on one of these tours?
We actually just facilitate meetings with the governor's office, meetings with the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, meetings with city council. Tour. Yeah, but then also facility tours, right? They do the political part, but then it's like also we get to go see it. And so, you know, some of the higher quality, I mean, many high quality businesses in Denver, but some of the operations that we know are very much, we want to sort of showcase the regulatory system, but also the people, because it's amazing when you know, we had 47 of the 50 largest cities in America, their city attorneys came, and we did an event where we did this exact thing. So it wasn't foreigners, it was, you know, U.S. attorneys, city attorneys, and these, you know, by the end of the tour of the 47, I think, you know, Andrew in our office had flipped the, you know, several northern states from they're like pretty much taking the what I call the smart Colorado, smart mom approach. No way we're having marijuana legal in our city or state. And next thing you know, they're like, this has been great. That you've literally changed my mind. And
that's incredible.
Because they see it and they're like, wow, this is jobs. This is like real people. And
people, when people who aren't involved with it, don't smoke cannabis, haven't used it, they're affected by all those years of war on drugs. And when they see that it's this beautiful little green plant and all the economy and that everybody that they see involved with aren't the stereotypical stoners.
Right.
I mean, on most days, you couldn't pick me and you out as a stereotypical stoner. We're not, right?
Yeah, but, it's people, it's kind of funny because it's like, we call it a lack of social empathy. They're people, it's like all the people that hate us the most are they're like, this is such a bad thing for Colorado or the country. They're doing so at a cocktail party. Drinking a substance that is clearly worse. But again, and I'm a drinker. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, I'm not judging that. But like this concept that they have in their mind that, pot, dope, whatever you want to call it, like, they were just raised thinking it makes you stupid. It makes you, they picture every one of us as the wino and the classic stereotypical wino in the street,
man, pass it over, man.
And, look, we haven't helped ourselves all the time. It's at certain times, some of the people that are the most outspoken are the least, the most stereotypical like that, perhaps. But, as things are changing, I was having a drinks with a city official who shall remain nameless, but is a very high level marijuana person.
Yeah. Okay.
And,
Denver or Colorado.
He or she was telling me, Christian, do you watch Bad Men? And this is a fad, this is someone who is very involved at the state and local level of regulating cannabis. And it's like, they're sitting there smoking cigarettes and drinking and, this is a fad. Like, look at cigarette smoking. It went away. I think in 25 years, we all think that, this marijuana fad, it was hot for a little while and it'll still be around. But, and I was like, man, your analogy is totally correct, except for that the fad was in that scenario is alcohol. Like in the future, and maybe cigarettes too, but, but I mean like the replace the cigarette with a joint and take the alcohol out of their hand, or you look at some of the products that are being developed in terms of recreating similar experiences to alcohol, through recombining, different cannabinoids and terpenes and, making it so there's like a healthy alternative so that when I'm at the bar in 15, 20 years, I'm looking up and it's how many of those bottles will have alcohol in them. And am I going to be the cigar smoker, that's like obnoxious to everyone because I'm still drinking my, Makers and Tito's, or are these companies going to come around and say, look, these won't kill people. And like, we can actually reduce alcohol consumption, increase the amount of quality fun that people have, and you enjoy wine for the taste. You're not drinking 6 glasses, I mean, it's a very interesting future that they don't get, because they just don't see it. And again, a lot of it really is like, I smoked pot in college and it made me tired or paranoid.
I smoked it once. I had a bad experience.
And I think most of them didn't, because anyone who's in politics, until relatively recently, you weren't allowed to smoke and become a politician. So if they had any designs on that,
it's just their excuse to say why they don't do it now.
Right. But there's a few exceptions. We have, interestingly, Representative Garnett has said it who's a state representative here. He's like one of the few people. He's like, I think I'm the only person who acknowledges being a cannabis consumer, like a recreational cannabis consumer in elected office. Like, I don't know how many
There's not too many people like that in the world.
His dad's a district attorney of Boulder, and he was a supporter of the campaign. And, he's a great kid. He's actually was one of the ones that was really brought up this potency issue and got really hammered by a lot of the industry folks saying you shouldn't have raised this issue. And I'm like, wow, that's the only guy or girl in, elected office that's admitting to being a cannabis consumer and like kind of says the exact, like proves our point. And, yet politics gets in the way, but, that's neither here nor there. It's like
judges smoke it, even the lawyers too.
Oh yeah. Well, hey man, like doctors, that's the other thing that's really interesting about the markets, right? Like my friends that are lawyers, they don't want to be seen in stores. They just never know who they're going to see there. And it's not because so they're still getting it the old fashioned way from someone with a medical card, because then there's no taxes. It's funny that's the old fashioned way now, right?
In someone's living room.
Right.
Hey, could you maybe up a stack at the medical store today?
My friend that smokes probably the most weed, but he's like the most paranoid about people finding out about it in terms of like.
Interesting.
Yeah. He still gets it from our buddy. He used to buy it and he had to get him, I think the two of us were the only two with medical cards. And I can't remember how many calls I would get, hey man, if you're going to the store, would you, pick this or that up? And like, I've still got friends that will ask people to go do it because they don't want to go. They're like, well, they try to take my ID and they try to scan it or something.
I don't want to know that was in there.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And it's, so I think that whole market too. I mean, if you, older people also feel very intimidated when they go into stores. They're walking in, they're like, what are all these strains and like all these kids, and it's like, I remember some guys like, and this kid has this, perfectly flat baseball brim on his hat and was talking to me about things I didn't even know what he was talking about. And I just said, I just wanted to experience it, but I ended up not buying anything because I didn't want to look stupid. Like, well, that's not good. That's like the consumer experience is going to fundamentally change. And I think that's a huge unaddressed market, as I mentioned before, but
the bud tenders, the education, all that's just so new.
Yeah, well, what I love about it too, I love, all the people that are coming in now. We have people coming from other states. We still aren't allowing non-citizens that are not, if you're a non-citizen and you're not a permanent resident here, like a green card holder,
right,
you can't invest in the Colorado industry. But like that still has widened it so much, and people that have come and, of course, there's been people that have said, yeah, it's way stronger than I expected and had a, not the greatest experience. But for every one of them, these guys that haven't smoked since since Woodstock and some other
I've
stuff.
Heard the stories.
Right. It's great, man. And like, it is a healthy thing. Like, if it helps people just like drink a little bit less, if it's 1 or 2 or 3 drinks less a week, it's literally over time will, shift the cost curve when they talk about healthcare. So the future is
that's a great way to look at it. Right.
The future is very bright for this, for this industry, this product for sure. But, we're still working out the kinks. I mean, you still can't just invest in it like it was, a good investment. You have to jump through a lot of hoops and background checks and other things. And, but it's a huge and fundamental change here. So I think anyone who's interested in the opportunity for cannabis, I wouldn't necessarily recommend coming here and starting your own brand new business, doing something that's not, everyone should create a better mousetrap. Always go for that. But like, it's like if I always tell people,
it is hard to start financially right now.
Oh, though. There's huge barriers to entry
right now.
Yeah. And it's like, rents are high, and anyone's coming in, like, if you're going to come in and just start a grow, like, you better really know what you're doing and have a way to differentiate your product or develop relationships so you're going to be able to sell your product. I'm not saying you can't do it, but I don't think it's that easy to do because a lot of people are doing it at a very high level.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. It's, I talked to Justin Jones with Dank, and he said they started out with $1,000 and 2 grow lights. Right. It's awesome. And look where they're at today. I mean, they've got multiple ancillary businesses, a dispensary, Kush bottles, Denver Consulting. I'm probably forgetting a couple of things.
Yeah, those guys are great. I love they're some of my favorite people because they did something similar. We did something similar in our law firm. We didn't have to come. We came in and there wasn't that many options, and but we still worked hard and maintain relationships, reputation, do whatever you can. But it'd be hard just to break into this space, and any of these big law firms that are doing it. If you look at, there's a bunch of stories like you just described of the fortunate few that were able to start at the beginning where everything is just like file this application and you can get going. That was before they even did. People were like, certificates of occupancy, what's that? And like
nobody was following any rules.
Yeah, I remember the days
because that's honestly
remember none of the lights had UL listings and like
I remember that.
Yeah,
everybody had to come and buy new lights. I remember that. Yeah.
Is that absolutely. You behind that?
I had nothing to do with that.
Of course you didn't. It was because building departments don't want fires. Like
absolutely.
There's a reason why you don't have UL listing because it was never a commercial. Never intended for it was for basements,
And cannabis industry has gotten there's been a focus, a magnifying glass put on them because so many other industries, businesses, they don't have to necessarily follow the letter of the law.
Oh, when you go in, and I mean, I used to do a bunch of commercial industrial leasing. Like they would not go in and have all these inspections.
No,
like
fire department's not going to care.
Yeah, the certificate of it was more just like random inspections occasionally or other things for fire, but there'd be people who go 20, 25 years without ever having an inspection.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they would have converted it from a storage warehouse to a much more industrial use, a change of what we call occupancies, right? And like, yeah, exactly. And right. I mean, for us, you can't even get your license and operate. You used to actually be able to get your licenses before you had your certificates of occupancy. Remember that?
Right. Yeah.
Now
people
you can't
are selling
even operate.
licenses.
So you think of it's like 6 to 10 to 12 months before you can of money out the door before you can start operating. And that makes sense, honestly, but it's it's tough.
Well, it's similar to other industry, other manufacturing, similar.
Yeah. If you're manufacturing something at a high level, there's going to be inspections, right? They're going to come in and look at your equipment and also if you don't have that happen and someone gets hurt, you're probably going to prison,
No, you're at least getting sued. You're definitely going to.
And here we are
policy.
using lights that got extension cords all over the place and flammable materials, and we're blowing butane through glass tubes. And again, I'm not judging any of this. Remember that back in the day?
It changed everything though, because it changed it from that extension cord culture.
Yep.
It changed it from I'm using my brother-in-law who's not an electrician but knows how to do this.
Yeah.
And now we're seeing some real innovation, real technology, grow rooms that look like commercial, butcher places or a commercial lab.
Totally.
Like it's really done a lot for the industry. The regulation's been good to some degree on that aspect.
I think it has. It really has raised the level, and it'll be interesting to watch in other states as they move from an unregulated or semi-regulated market. How much we can take from and make the growing pains less, severe because you won't get blindsided by stuff. But it's a fundamental change. That doesn't mean that obviously outdoor cultivation is different. It's when you're, it's not going to change operationally.
Farming.
It shouldn't change that much. Pesticides being the big, challenge for a lot of people, and you have, the inability to use things that would otherwise, we all know, be safe, but for the lack of federal labeling stuff, that's challenging. And it doesn't mean it can't be done, but I mean, besides, it's growing inside that people are doing because you weren't always trying to hide, but you're trying to keep a low profile.
Mm-hmm.
You weren't, of course, why would you couldn't go get a certificate of occupancy. Be like, hey, would you come check out my cultivation facility that's quasi legal? Right. Exactly. I mean, it just didn't work. That the translation of those two, I think, is one of the hardest, if not the hardest transition, for people that have to actually work in a highly
also brought in
world.
all these people who ended up with 10, 20, 30,000 square feet of manufacturing space with no manufacturing background.
None.
So, of course, they did almost everything wrong.
Right. Totally, man. It's like,
Right. So, we can't block that door. Oh, we have to have
safety. It's like, well, that's how people get out when there's a fire.
Yeah, we can't use that stairway.
Yeah, it's funny though too, because like I've was meeting with people talking about, it's like listening to people in the industry too that are now have learned all these things. But like, it's just ridiculous that, the fire department comes and they say you need this door here. And then the police department comes and say you can't have this thing unlocked. And I was like, guess what, guys? Now it sounds like my old job because that's always been, there's always discrepancies between them and any industry. So you got people who became very sophisticated at complying, but they don't know that they're actually now being treated fairly. For a while it seemed like they were being picked on, and they were. But now it's like, no, you're actually just being treated like everyone else. Like this is what happens when you have to go through fire inspections and certain things.
Yeah. When you have a fire, you get in trouble.
Right, exactly. You're not being picked on for,
You just don't know what you're doing.
You really should not be using combustible pressurized gas in a near a
non-ventilated.
Stove. Right, exactly. It's like these types of things were just, the way they were done. I mean, that's what happens. I mean, that's, if you look at, the point of regulation and other things, it's not to just cut out the small guy or a lack of, non-sophisticated people. It does end up doing that a lot of time.
There's plenty of small people in the industry though. Yeah. That's true, right? Because that's a myth people say all the time. It's like, oh, big business is going to take over. It's only big players. It's like, no, there's tons of small people.
Yeah. And this whole, there is no Walmart of weed yet. Maybe there will be, but I think that it's actually it ebbs and it flows, and I think we're looking at a point now where you have overproduction in Colorado to the extent that people are going to have to start differentiating on quality, even at the lower levels. I think you are going to have.
Is good. Right.
It is. It ultimately is good. For a while, just crank it out, right?
I saw this happen in Northern California too. As soon as the volume reached so high that the price dropped low, people started growing higher quality product.
Yeah.
To raise their price, and it raised the overall general price as well. But it took that dive in the market, and then people figuring out, okay, how other people are getting paid. How do I get paid?
July 2016, we're seeing a point where we're dropping below $1,000 a pound.
Right. I haven't read, but I heard that we were at $750.
And that would have been, that's another couple 10, 20% from even last week that I've heard the same thing. And again, this is partly because, I mean, people are just coming online with a lot of stuff, and we'll see. I mean, think about the end of the summer. Think about after Pueblo harvest and some of the outdoor harvest
Lots
type
of outdoor
stuff.
harvest coming in.
But again, I think a lot of it gets turned into oil, or did this year. I mean, I think, people are like, well, I'll just keep dropping the price. I'm like, well, you don't own. That's the tricky thing about vertical integration and a transition from a vertically integrated market to a non-vertically integrated market. Most of the big players, I mean, there is not one big player that is a purely retail store concept. Every one of the big players is a retail store with their own grow.
Right, absolutely.
But I look at them like, look at Whole Foods. They have all of their 365 organic products, literally like almost everything next to everything, but they still carry other people's brands. Like, I think that's the way the market goes, over time, because I don't necessarily want to go to a store. It would be nice if I could go to a store where I could, have the 5 top brands available to me. I don't go to the liquor store. I go to if you go to the brew pub, you can buy some growlers of that particular type of beer, but they even have someone else's beer there. They have partnerships with their friends.
Tap rooms. Look at tap rooms.
And so I think, people are not just always going to want to go where you control every product. And I think you see it in the products that are on the shelves. That's where you see that's a differentiation, right? Okay, we got our bud and it's good, it's bad, it's, whatever. Yeah, but like then you also have, I can go there and I'm going there to buy maybe some of the products you have on your shelves, new products, MIPS products or vape pens or whatever. And while I'm there, I'm going to buy some of your stuff. Right. I mean, there still are people that people go there for their weed. And maybe they don't buy any products or they pick up something. But I think a lot of people too, they're just going in to see what's there and check out products, Yeah,
as a business person and a successful marketer, I look at a lot of that. The branding on this stuff, on the hard goods like the vape pens or the edibles, like that type of branding is working, right? And people go buy Open or a specific cannabis food, and the branding on that's working. The branding that I haven't seen work yet is on the actual flowers, on the cannabis. Right now, people have tried to start some buddy brand, and I can't think of any more off the top of my head, but I don't think they understand the concept of like you can't just say, okay, I'm gonna make a brand of weed and sell it. Right, like it needs to be something different, something special.
No, I mean, I think that if you have like stores that have reputations for having very high quality weed, that's how you get your like.
Yeah. The store has the quality, but then that's not the brand. That's the thing I'm talking about.
The brand is mixed with the store, right?
Right.
And there's not, so they haven't.
Because the store right now, they're just picking out the highest quality weed or trying to grow the highest quality weed.
Sure.
Right, and it currently today, July 2016. You can't go to a wholesale supplier that's the best in one product. It's currently not like wine.
Nope.
Where you're like, okay, that whole region grows the best Pinot, so we get all our juice from, that juicery, right, to make Pinot.
I think that I think wine is just, perhaps it's our timing here too with Northern California and Oregon, being these, wine really meccas for the United States, but particularly Northern California. I mean, wine, it's like we've been regulating the grapes, is what I always tell people, for a while too. This applies not just to the market, but to the regulations as well. We regulate grapes instead of regulating wine, and I think that we started moving towards regulating the wine, right? We're like, every gram needs to be tracked from seed to sale. Like, yes, it does. Or you can just take big picture, make sure most of it's getting through the system, if not all of it. But you don't get distracted with small leakage, right? And then when you move into the market stuff, I mean, people buy grape juice from those regions, but then they produce things, and they'll be wine brands that they develop, but they can't call themselves a Sonoma County, brand because they're not actually manufactured and located there, right?
Right, exactly.
And so I think those types of things where areas are going to become, they're going to become, and that's what they're doing a ton of in California. That's going to serve them very well when the time comes to export to other countries.
That is a branding that I feel like can survive, is the Appalachian brand, even though it still goes back to the strains, and the grower, right?
Well, that's the other thing too, is like, Cabernet. I like Cabernets. I mean, you can see some of the similarities. Like, I like this particular type of, this family of strains. The problem is most people aren't educated on what those families strains are. And if you actually look at red
indicas,
wine
sativa.
too, most of them are not 100% Cabernet, 100% Merlot, 100%. I mean, a lot of them,
They're all mostly
they're
blends.
blends. So when people start doing proprietary blends, and I'm of the opinion that people are going to still be smoking joints and other things over time. Like I'm actually not
absolutely.
one of the people that just thinks it's all
going to
going
get all
edibles and
prepackaged.
vape
I don't
pens
think
and
so
stuff,
either.
you know?
I think people are going to continue to smoke flower.
Yeah. So if someone's really good, like you think about winemaking, you know, you got the what's his name, Jonathan Swift or whatever the guy's name that does like The Prisoner, and he's sort of like this rock star winemaker guy. And I was just thinking about, you know, he knows how to blend things intelligently. So I know guys that are doing similar things with cannabis. Like they're saying, you know, I can go out and I can walk into another market and find 3 or 4 strains that are similar enough to the things that I do, and I've got my blends for my pre-rolled joints or other things, and make high quality things. Like, and it's more like high end. It's not everyone's like, oh, Marlboro Greens. No, like this is like Monte Cristo type stuff, right? This is not
Right, absolutely.
or high end cigars, right? Or the you know the brand like the cigarillos or whatever you want to call them, like the Nat
right?
Shermans or the other
Right.
things, right? So we're like, I look at it as that. I don't just want a pack of 20 Parliament joints. Like I want a nice blended experience. Now, sure, someone's going to want the black, you know, the cools or whatever the, you know, insert branding, but those are all proprietary
Bernie's
blends of
cookies.
tobacco too. Right. Exactly.
Right.
But I think right now
Burner's
people
cookies.
are focusing on the strains. They're brand, you know, they're just talking about their strains. What the people don't remember what store it was from. A lot of times I was like, oh, it was an OG Kush or it was you know, something or other. They won't ask like what
Right.
store and what strain, because like you and I both know how different those things are. I think smart people are going to start coming up with proprietary blends, or even start calling their brands of cannabis something that's not really, you know, the parentheses below is like mix of these two, not, you know, branded as those two, you know? And so over time I think that'll start to, you know, be put into the market a little bit more. Super connoisseurs are going to be super connoisseurs, but I just think the way we talk
that's
about
just a small percent of us.
I know. And that's the thing is like, you know, you got to address this bigger market, and what wine has done very well. And I hate to keep coming back to wine because there's a lot of differences too, but
No, I think it's a great integrated
but with
species.
wine, it's like, it's about when you go to a wine store, the best wine stores are not the ones where you feel uncomfortable. They're the ones where they come in and say, what do you like? Well, you should try this or these other things. Like they might know a ton about wine, but they're very approachable. You don't become when you become you know, when you go up the sommelier world, it's a lot about customer service and knowledge and, you know, the way you interact with people. And like, you know, you don't go to a place of the master sommelier will be there just impressing you with his like wit, knowledge, sense of humor. He'll womanize someone at the table. You know, it's a whole cultural thing. It's not just like, I know so much more about this and I'm rolling my eyes because you don't understand what I'm talking about. And I'm not trying to put the vast majority of people I see at stores, like they do just fine, but a lot of times they just speak over, or they don't even realize what they're doing. And like the worst is when someone's like, well, I eat 40 milligrams, so start with 30 or 20, you know, or something like that. Like when it should be like, start with like 5, you know, you know, 5. I think it's like very few people have a bad experience. Like 1 out of 20. 10, you're going to get more into the like, you know, 1 out of 10.
Right.
Like, it's going to be one guy in the group's like, well, that was too much. Or even, you know, like I'm a 5 milligram and then move my way up because like I'm not, you know, don't get me wrong. There's times where maybe I'm more than that, but like I like that small, you know, 5 to 10 milligram initial sort of dose, go out, laugh, you know, augment later on with some of these proprietary blends we're talking about.
Yeah, right. Wow, this sounds like a great future we're talking about. Man, do you have a prediction, a future prediction? Can you predict something for me? I want to come back in several years and say, Christian, you called it.
Yeah, well, you know, my prediction and my hope is something I said earlier, which is, you know, that in the future, many of the alcohol products that we see and like that experience will be replaced with cannabis. And, you know, that social experience doesn't need to be, you know, you're walking into a smoky environment or a bunch of vaporizers are around or anything else. I mean, literally, you know, the distilled cannabis concept that Abu and a number of other folks have talked about. This is something I've been thinking about since the beginning, is literally replacing, you know, a good chunk of the alcohol market with these products, or augmenting them. Again,
Sure, a different choice.
You know, I don't want to declare war on big alcohol, you know, but I think over time, like
glass of rye is fine.
Yeah, man. Look, I'd love to go
day.
drink, 1 or 2 glasses and pay a lot more for that bottle of wine or that glass of whiskey.
Yeah, when it's great.
What is the whiskey library in Portland? I don't know if you've ever been there. It's like
no, it sounds great.
Like
though.
every whiskey in the world, and you can have it's like a 2-drink maximum. Gosh. And so what you could do is you have this just a different sort of experience. What I don't see in the future is standalone sort of cannabis smoking and drinking establishment, that are separate but equal. I see this being more integrated into.
Do you think we're going to allow to have social smoking?
Yeah, it's going to happen eventually, if not through this ballot initiative process. And, they're coming up here. There's going to be 2 probably most likely on the ballot, but in Denver. But yeah, I think it's just, first of all, it's been going on. It's weird at Red Rocks now, right? Like you have to go out to the side.
Oh, I know. I know. Isn't that odd? They're like, you got to go to the smoking section.
Right.
And so you're standing out there in front of everybody that's walking by. And security's like, no, they go over to the smoking section.
I know. It's pretty funny. Although I've had a couple of times where they're like, is that a cigarette? I'm like, nope. They're like, okay. And they keep going, but now they're, times are changing. I think marijuana will be federally deregulated. First term of Hillary Clinton's, first year or so of Hillary Clinton's second term, if she gets elected. If not, Trump gets elected, it'll probably be legal by January 20th, 2017, because they'll have to find a way not to roll all of the federal, marshals into all these states and pry the joints from our hands like Chris Christie.
Yeah, right. That's never happened. It's never going back.
I know. Everyone thinks about that. It's just like, that's impossible. You get elected president as a Republican, and then in comes the troops.
Right. Well, that's the interesting thing.
It's scary, though.
It's bipartisan, though. There's bipartisan support for this issue because for many reasons, the economy is one. Personal choice is another thing. Conservative people, liberal people, we both all feel the same way. It's like, there's a personal choice issue, right?
That's why I kind of joke about, I'm only half joking when I say that Donald Trump getting elected means marijuana would be legal January 20th, assuming he gets sworn in, January 21st or whatever of 2017. Because if your guy that's going to be AG or your government is going to, has made promises because the federal law still says this is federally illegal, to go into 27 states that have medical,
that's never,
and 8 or 9 states, they can't do it.
They can't.
So it's like the perfect moment between now and then to say, well, we don't want them. We don't want to have to do this. Fix the law. Everyone just do a quick. Everyone agrees. Defederalize. Do something. Again, I know that sounds outrageous to a lot of people, but I think it's an interesting thing to think about.
Concept.
So
do you think it could happen? Do you think they could just snap their finger and say, okay, Schedule 1 to Schedule 3? Do you think that's possible?
Yeah, they could absolutely, it's more than the snap of the finger, but in terms of Washington politics, it's even quicker than a snap of a finger. But yes, if you made that move, it's something that's being strongly pushed now. Moving to Schedule 2 is not good. It doesn't do anything for us on the 280E tax issue.
Nope, absolutely not.
And it does Schedule 3, at least temporarily. And it opens up for research, but until you break the NIDA monopoly, you still got to go through that whole process, which is the real
3 to 7 years.
Right. So, I think that they won't do it for political reasons, but I think that could be one. Obviously, we want defederalization. We want it to be removed entirely from the schedules, but that's not going to happen administratively, but Schedule 3 doesn't seem that far-fetched. My concern is they move it to Schedule 2 and then they're like, okay, it's kind of like a CBD law, right? We did something for the kids or we did something for the, we've moved it to Schedule 2. We're now acknowledging there's medical benefit, but then they don't have to do anything. Then it's like, okay, on to the next thing. And that's classic.
Georgia did a similar thing.
Yeah, totally. Georgia did it. You see a lot of people doing it. And so, it happened all over the country. But that was not necessarily a bad thing. It still got the conversation going. But you don't want them to deal with it. It's really what Ohio did, right? They put in, but it's not a terrible medical law. But instead of being like, oh, crap, we got this state law going to go on the ballot, probably going to pass this time for medical that's much more open. And so they passed a more restrictive state law.
Right.
Then they took it off the ballot. So, it's going to be, I think it's going to be, ultimately it's defederalization, but I think the conversation after November shifts entirely not to will the federal government regulate it, but how it will regulate it. And that, that's not I'm saying this and that there are people that are working on that strategy. Probably a number of people I don't know, a number of people I do know though. And, something I work on is preparing for a federal regulatory regime that's reasonable, because we have to be honest when it focus shifts to Washington, D.C., there's a lot of people with a lot of money in a lot of these industries. Everyone talks about pharma and alcohol, all these things. They're not working against this now. They're keeping their powder dry, so to speak, so that when it does go to DC, they're going to have a lot of say. If you look at like internet gaming and other things that have shifted from illegal to legal or quasi-legal, you gotta be smart about how you approach it, and that's really, the future fight is in DC.
So many unknowns. Yeah, that's for sure. What we kind of briefly spoke about hemp, but what about the future of hemp?
Sure. Yeah, hemp is just another. It's funny, we were writing Amendment 64, and there's a rule in Colorado, as in most places, called a single subject rule. So if you're going to put something on the ballot, it has to be about a single subject. And probably anyone listening to this understands the massive difference between hemp regulation and, cannabis for adult use regulation. But for the longest time, it's been regulated as though they're the exact same thing.
Right.
So we figured, why not throw it on let's see if we can get it on the ballot and actually regulate hemp in Amendment 64 too. And they did, It
happened to work.
Right.
Kind of Nobody even know it.
We used their sort of lack of knowledge against them, let's say, but it's become a very, I would say it's become a more and more exciting every year in terms of the potential. We've seen some bigger and bigger crops. We now, people experimenting in Colorado with larger and larger fields and taking bigger and bigger risks in terms of, we have this interesting way of, it goes over a certain percentage, it's no longer hemp, in Colorado, and then you might have to destroy your whole crop. But, people creating pretty significant seed, sort of seed.
Right, because it all has to be self-generated here in Colorado, the seed.
And now we're seeing real industrial folks coming and saying, well, all right, how are we going to process it? Like, what's the next steps? And, Europe and China dominate hemp.
Absolutely.
China has a secret institute and a secret development project that we don't even know what they're doing, but China's obviously realizes the potential there. A lot of people talk about Canada. Canada's not as nearly as sophisticated when it comes to hemp. They're doing, obviously they do some hemp stuff up there, but yeah, it's Europe and China are the game right now, and we're far behind. We're really far behind. But with the federal farm bill, Kentucky, some of these other places coming on, I think the future for hemp is very bright. The tricky part is that, like many people I've talked about earlier that are, experts, but they're not really, you hear all sorts of different things that hemp's this panacea for X, Y, and Z. When it's not. But if you look at what Europe's doing with fabricating auto parts, carbon fiber replacement type stuff, it's being put into BMWs. As we sit here, it's being used as a lightweight, very strong
plastic
material, right? And this is not. This is known. It should be in very high demand.
It's everywhere.
But hey, man, look, fighter planes will be made out of hemp in the future. The problem is you can't do it until you've proven for a period of time that it's safe and everything else. But everyone knows it's safe. That's why it's just in our cars and stuff, not our planes yet, but soon enough,
Yeah, all the farmers that I talk to, the industrial farmers, the row crop farmers, when they find out what my interests are, what I do, they immediately ask about industrial hemp for seed, hemp for animal food. They've all heard some great story about how they can be involved with hemp, and everybody's excited about it.
If we really embrace it in this country, and we compete in the world market for it, it is a very, very, very solid crop. There will be absolutely opportunities for farmers to, that have been racing to the bottom and commoditization of other soybeans, corn, these other things. Like, absolutely, there is a great place for hemp. Also, it's not that water intensive, needs water at certain parts of its life, but then it can manage.
Fiber and industrial uses is fine.
Absolutely. And then there's the whole different thing, which is like CBD, CBG production, other cannabinoid production using hemp. And that's just a fascinating world. That throws the whole financial paradigm on its head when people look at it as fiber, cellulose, seed, food, oil.
Medicine.
That was what they were looking at it at first. But now you throw medicine in there, right?
All
of a sudden you throw medicine in there and you're like, wow, it's a crop that's like a buffalo of sorts, right? You can use all the parts for different things and monetize them in a way that's good for the environment. And, it's a fascinating thing.
It's an incredible plant.
It is.
Hemp plant, the coconut plant, both of those it can just generate so much goodness for all of us.
Oh, it's wild, Thank the good Lord we didn't make coconuts illegal for some crazy reason,
Yeah, that's right. I'd be packaging up cocoa fiber soil in the dark.
Guerrilla.
Right, guerrilla style.
Growing coconuts in like a warehouse somewhere.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it was my dwarf Malaysian variety.
Yeah, all the little tiny trees with tiny coconuts,
Oh, that's funny. I think I should make a comic about that. That's great. That's a great idea. I'm going to run with that one.
Give me a little credit, man. Just a tiny shout out would be appreciated.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. So this has been fun.
Yeah, man.
I got a couple things I generally try to ask everybody, and one is terminology.
Sure.
Right. There's our industry has a whole special language of terminology, and growing and producing it. And do you guys also use the same terminology? Or have you developed terminology of your own to describe this? Slang words, maybe, right?
Sure. And it's always offending someone, but like adult use, marijuana versus recreation, recreational sounds frivolous is what I'd hear from people. Right, I'm like, well, right. I live in Denver where Recreational Equipment International is like the coolest store. REI is the coolest store. Like recreation's not a bad word here, but back east, it's like recreation's,
bad
for when you make enough money and you can go to the Hamptons or whatever, right? And it's, it's bad. It's not whatever.
It's pretty affluent.
In terms of the legal, the legal world of this, we talk about adult use because that sounds better. Like retail confuses people. A retail store seems like a medical store or non-medical.
I tell people I have a retail hydroponic store and they think I'm selling weed.
Right, exactly. Right? So we try to, we use things like adult use. Obviously the funny thing about cannabis versus marijuana has been always an interesting thing where people, say you got to stop saying marijuana because it's racist. I'm like, well, the law is the law. Though we've tried to change some of it. Like my fight is not changing, amending the Colorado Constitution and all of our statutes from marijuana to cannabis. I'll let someone else fight that fight when I'm working on whatever it is
Something
next,
else.
psychedelics,
Right.
whatever, but, we try to use cultivator. We try to, grower, cultivator. We try to use things that are professional that sound, because it's when I'm talking about, the chief plant husbandry officer at a facility, as opposed to, the head grower. Bud tender.
CPH.
I think bud tender does a disservice at times to medical marijuana. It's great for talking to me and you. Like, the bud tenders
Yeah,
are
absolutely. They're just so uneducated for the most part.
Yeah, but just trying to find a better, more palatable thing for all stuff. But I'm not I don't focus on the language or being politically correct. The language we use is whatever people can understand without having to explain it to them. Like even the word cannabis, you get people say, well,
right?
Are you trying to trick people? Because they don't know what cannabis is. I'm like, at this point, I'm pretty sure everyone knows what cannabis is, but they're like, are you trying to trick people or not? And I'm like, well, no, but I'm getting shit from these people saying it's racist. I'm getting shit from these people saying that's not the scientific word cannabis is, and so does it make sense to evolve to something better? Of course, but it's the medical marijuana law.
Yeah, right. California is the first to use cannabis, I believe.
Yep.
In their legal framework.
Yep. And we're trying to do the same things in little stuff we do, but again, it creates vast inconsistencies. So I just wonder if it'll be a carryover. But dispensaries, it's interesting, right? It's kind of like the word apothecary or other things. It's sort of an old. I think in time it'll be an old fashioned word.
A little frivolous.
Wellness center and other things, But,
yeah, right.
But it's look, I think all cannabis use is it's a wellness oriented thing. Medical, I think medical, frankly, goes away in the relatively near future, that term, because of the FDA and other things.
Yeah, I mean, technically, it's you're making a claim that's unsubstantiated.
Yeah, it is literally in the definition like it's medical marijuana. But I think there's
But you couldn't have medical lavender today. You couldn't sell medical lavender.
No, if you said it by definition would not be allowed to be sold. So I think I find language fascinating. I'm a lawyer, obviously, so language is incredibly important. But it's it's interesting watching it develop. Dabbing, there's certain things that just sound bad, and like, I try to
dabs.
Yeah, and I try to, obviously we're trying to win hearts and minds. So these people don't understand it at all. Never smoked, smoked marijuana, weed. They still call it dope, or whatever.
Right.
I'm like, dope, like heroin, like, it's like such a disconnect.
No, we're not doing dope.
I know, or the weed, the dope, and so. A lot of the language I use is to soften when I'm talking to media or when I'm, presenting to little old ladies or conservative groups like, the Hearts and Minds campaigns that we're involved in now. I just try to,
Do you use the term marijuana when you talk to these people?
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
But I'll mix in cannabis too,
Cannabis,
I'll say, maybe I'll say marijuana and they'll like, but cannabis is a term that we use. Don't want to make it, any of you guys seem like I'm making up a word. That's actually a scientific word. And you can you don't have to go through the whole spiel about, unless you really want to, but you can go into the whole thing about, the racist underpinnings of the beginning. It
gives you a little educational point, I find. I do use cannabis. I've used it for 20 plus years, literally, but I use the word cannabis as well. So, I find that if people don't know about it, it gives me an opportunity for education.
Absolutely.
Right? And you get
Totally
to have
agree.
a little conversation, and almost always they walk away with a different perspective of it.
Yep.
So it's a good time to chat.
Yeah, it's
right?
good. Like I said, if you have the time to do it, it's great to make the point. If you don't, people think you're trying to trick them.
I have no idea.
They're like, "Oh, you're trying to make it sound nicer than it is." I'm
I
like,
have no idea what you're talking about.
no.
Right? Yeah, I've had conversations with people, and it went like this: "Oh, cannabis." She's like, "Cannabis? It's a plant. They've made it illegal. How can they make a plant illegal?" Well, it's marijuana. Oh, marijuana.
I know.
Right.
It's funny, man. It's it'll be interesting to watch all of this develop in terms of, the language in particular, because, like I said, some places are very hardcore about, do not call it marijuana. I'm like, sorry.
Absolutely.
And like, I wasn't using the H in my spelling, I wasn't saying marijuana. But it's, it's just a part of the law. So it's like when you're undoing laws, you're going to have to like use the language that people know, lest they think you're trying to trick them. That was really the biggest concern in Amendment 64.
Right.
Which, interestingly, right? Proposition 64. That worked out.
Yeah, it did. So you're a pioneer in the legal field of cannabis. Previously, it was criminal. If you were an attorney that focused on cannabis, you were a criminal attorney.
Yep.
Right. And the tides are changing now. Right. If you want to focus on cannabis or marijuana, and being an attorney, you're focusing on the legal industry. If there's somebody out there who wants to be an attorney or is just studying for his bar or is planning on going to law school this fall, you got some advice for these people on how to enter the field or maybe how to approach it?
Well, first of all, University of Denver is a good option. They have their own cannabis-oriented programming for their law
Wellington's
school.
got a class or something.
Jordan's doing some classes. We have the Vicente Sederberg Professor of Law and Policy, Sam Kamen. It's our endowed chair there, teaches this, but he comes from a criminal defense background. I think a lot of people criminal defense is a good background to have. Everyone should know, it's important that people know their rights. But the classes you need to take now, they're land use, planning, administrative law, regulatory, administrative regulatory law, corporate transactions. At CU Boulder, where I went to law school, you got the Entrepreneurial Law Clinic, which is really writing contracts, leases, employment agreements, operating agreements, all these types of things. I mean, that is the key for anyone who's going to law school now to focus on. Pretend as though you're being a business lawyer, but you have to add in all the other real estate stuff too. Cannabis law, everyone's like, oh, there's no such thing. Like, yeah, there is. Just like there's oil and gas law. It's a specific law that you then have to apply to all the areas of practice.
Wow, Christian, it's been a great conversation with you here today, and kind of opened up a couple other questions and a couple other people I want to chat with, and hopefully maybe you can come back in the future.
Anytime, you'll have me.
Awesome. Well, hey, let's finish rolling this one up, and we'll take it on to the living room.
Sounds good, man.
Yeah. Thanks, Christian.
You got it.